Welcome to Works in Progress. I'm Darrin Hagen, and I'm very excited to be sharing with you some very important work that's been happening. But first, I'd like to take this moment to acknowledge that I'm speaking to you from the banks of the Kiskatchewansipi, the swift-flowing river that creates a highway that is born in the mountains, travels through Treaty 6 territory, across traditional homelands occupied by generations of Indigenous peoples, bringing its water to the land within Treaties 4, Treaty 5, and Treaty 10. Not only is this river a source of life, it has also been the source of migration, inspiration, and culture for centuries. We are approaching a very pivotal anniversary in Edmonton's history. On May 30th, it will have been 40 years since 56 Edmonton police and RCMP stormed into the Pisces Health Spa, arresting all the men inside, eventually charging 60 men as criminals. Their only crime was being gay. In the 4 decades since, the narrative of what occurred that night has been told by the media or by the police. That's going to change today. For a few years, I have been studying the information that is available about the raid, and as new files have finally been slowly released by the police, and as some of the people involved have opened up to share their stories, I have been incorporating them into a real narrative. Not only the details of the undercover investigation and the raid itself, but the impact that the arrests and charges had on some of the men that were caught in the web of homophobia. It was 40 years ago that the Pisces raid happened, and we're standing in the back alley behind the old Pisces with one of the most famous, he prefers infamous, found-ins that was arrested that night. And everybody say hello to the amazing Michael Phair. Thanks so much for joining us today.
Thank you.
And thanks so much for sharing your story with us. It's really important, and I'm just so proud that you could be here with us for this. So just for everyone watching that doesn't know why we're standing in a back alley, this entrance back here was the old entrance to the Pisces Health Spa back in the 1980s.
Yep.
In 78, and it was downstairs?
Yeah.
Down a few stairs?
It was kind of the basement. At that time, none of Grant McCune was here at all, and there was other buildings about this size or larger all here. So this was a dark alley, in fact.
North of the tracks, where nobody ever went.
Nobody ever went. So
so it was discreet and private.
Very discreet and very private, and many kinds of events like this, after a while, it start to move back in the memory a bit. And so, in reviewing it again, it was like, yeah, okay, now remember. And so, a lot of things have come back as I've kind of thought about it again.
I bet. So recalling those events, are there any things that are surprising you?
Some of the language that was used, and the number. I was baffled then, and still the number of police that were involved. I mean, there were more police than those of us who were in the place. It's like, so what did they expect, that we were there with shotguns and rifles, that we were going to go after them or something? I mean, most of us were there with practically no clothes on to begin with.
February 1981. As a result of information received, an investigation was commenced on the 27th of January, 1981, into the sexual behavior of males frequenting Pisces Health Spa, 10508 109th Street, rear.
The unidentified male who approached and complained to the police was interviewed, and he stated that he had learned from the good sources that group sex and various other sexual acts were taking place between males at Pisces Health Spa.
During his interview, he was asked if he would go into the premises, and he agreed. He went in 3 different nights and then stated he could no longer go in, as the males in the place were so sexually aggressive he feared for his safety. He was thanked for his assistance.
Investigations from 27 January 1981 to 29 May 1981 consisted of the use of 9 undercover police officers who joined the spa as members
and who frequented the spa on numerous occasions, usually in pairs for their own protection, and usually on a Friday or Saturday night.
They have reported many incidents of having observed group sex in two party rooms, anal intercourse, fellatio, and mutual masturbation and fellatio in the shower area in so-called private rooms.
On the nights that the undercover men were in the spa, detectives kept observations on the premises recording license numbers of arriving and departing clients, and with the assistance of identification section, approximately 500 photographs were taken of these clients arriving and departing.
The clients have been identified by vehicle registration checks and could be interviewed should it become necessary.
From membership records seized, it is determined that the spa has well in excess of 2,000 members.
On the nights that observations were kept on the spa, at any one time, it was estimated that there were from 60 to 100 males present at the spa.
Even now, 40 years later, very few men that were arrested that night have ever spoken publicly about their experiences. We are extremely fortunate then to be able to hear about that experience from someone who was actually there that night, and someone whose life changed forever because of the raid. Of course, I'm speaking about one of my favorite Edmontonians, Michael Phair. For those that don't understand the role that a bathhouse plays in a gay community, tell us about that a little bit, about how it is important for people.
Yeah. It's very discreet and very private, and many people like myself would come and we find a place to park. I always look to make sure there weren't any patrol cars around or anything like that, much of anybody around.
Even before the raid? Even
before the raids, yeah, that whole notion. Because it was, in fact, I think most people like myself consider it a safe place. Been open for a while, gone well. There've never been any issues.
So how does it feel to know that you were photographed coming in and out of this building over and over again?
Not only photographed, my understanding was they also took down license plate numbers of vehicles as well.
They did.
So they had plenty of kind of information. And I was both appalled and amazed. And it was like, you could have done that in one night. And that it's like 3 months. And then the undercover. Then they sent in undercover police in addition. Kind of thing that, and numerous times as it turned out, because that when the police testified at some of the trials, they've been there. I've been there. I've been in 8 different times. It's like, oh my God, that's more than I've ever was there. Certainly myself, and I think many others inside felt very safe, and that there wasn't any issues, any problems. We came. Certainly part of that was for sexual reasons, but also because we talked with people. And as I said, I was watching TV when this all took place. I was watching the
Do you remember what you were watching?
Yes, the late night news coming out of Spokane.
I saw a 55-year-old male wearing only a towel standing in front of another 55-year-old male who was standing on a bench. The standing male had his right leg up and resting on the bench, and the sitting male had his left hand up under the other's towel.
We were sitting in my room, number 140. We overheard 2 males in number 142, sounds of kissing. Then, for 3 to 5 minutes, 1 male emitting loud groaning sounds. Groans were from a love-making session, as if they had taken turns from different positions.
Me. How can I join? He. $10 member fee and room or locker each time you return. Asked my name. He then filled in a registration card. Had me come in, and he then filled in the plastic card and had me sign the bottom. He then asked what type of room, and I said single. He then gave me 3 towels and the key to room number 115, $8. Single bed, no pillow, night table.
I observed 1 male on his hands and knees, with another male squatted down behind him, performing doggy-style anal intercourse. I could see the 3rd male lying on his back in front of the male on hands and knees. I could also hear sucking sounds.
One took towel off, bent over facing north wall, and backed bare-assed into the center of the room. He wiggled his rear from side to side. 2 males standing face to face in the center of the room, each feeling the other's penis. 1 male bends over, appears to put penis of other male into his mouth.
About 2 minutes later, my partner knocked and I let him in. We disrobed, wrapped towels around her waist, and left the room. Just as we walked out the door, a man whom I knew, a former jail guard, came out of a door from my left. Hoping he wouldn't recognize me, I ignored him and continued into the jacuzzi. When my partner and I were seated in the hot pool, I told the person mentioned above I knew I was a policeman.
Against the E-wall directly in front of the door, I saw a man on his knees, chest to the floor, being obviously buggered.
I forgot my membership card. The attendant was angry but let us in anyway. He stated the membership card was the only thing that kept them from getting busted, like the spa in Toronto. Northwest party room. I almost stepped on a male laying on the floor at the door. His legs were spread apart, and he had his hands on an erect penis, rubbing it. His eyes were open, and he made no attempt to move.
At approximately 3 a.m., I noted two males, one 6'2" height and 200 pounds, black hair, the other one 5'1" and 160 pounds, glasses, black hair. They were in the shower. The tall guy was washing the short guy, taking great care of his penis and rear. I, redacted, have not seen these two people before, nor did I see them earlier in the evening.
I can't help but feeling that they were more than a little suspicious this time, although nothing was said and our presence was not challenged. We noticed the entry of the other two police members but did not communicate at all during our stay. My partner and I had a great deal more trouble this time than last, as we were followed very closely by a male having a keen interest in my partner. This male followed us for the entire time we were in the spa.
It's going to seem a little bit redundant to give you a language and content warning now after listening to that. I apologize, I should have done that before that happened, and a trigger warning just for anyone, but I'm hoping that everyone knew what they were signing up for today. So, and it might not get any worse, we'll see. Now, in order to share just a sample of the reams of documentation that has become available, you might be wondering who all those people were. We actually enlisted 10 young queer artists to assist us. We asked them to come in here in socially distant, COVID-friendly situation and to do a cold read of the selections of the material pulled from the police files, the media coverage, and the eyewitness accounts that I have gathered through interviews over the years. And then they were invited to share their reactions. Let's see how they reacted.
It feels like you're not safe to occupy the spaces that were made for you in a way, one way.
For me, it's very hard to put myself in the shoes of those folks back in the day, back in 1981, and attending those the bathhouses, and just that fear of being arrested, but because also at the time being gay is just not accepted as much as it is now, and that being one of the few queer spaces that you would feel safe in a way, to be invaded, is that the right word, by police. I cannot even wrap my head around it.
Well, it's so interesting too, like if we're talking about photographs, and I feel like people use photographs as like here's an objective reality, but it's like really not, right? Like there's such a frame here of hatred, really.
It's vulnerable. That's, realistically speaking, everything I think it could be. It couldn't be anything else other than vulnerable because it doesn't have anything else to, let's say, cloth and obscure itself by. It's just full it's transparency to the point of like not being able to hide anything else other from oneself there in that moment. Vulnerability in the sense of like he's there naked, but vulnerability in the sense that now he is just naked and completely exposed.
It's fascinating to see reactions from the younger generation to events that happened before they were even born. It's a reminder of how much things have changed, and also a reminder of how much still remains to change. Now, let's hear more from Michael Phair as he describes what it was like to actually be in the Pisces spa as the raid was happening.
What I saw first out of the corner of my eye, because I was watching the TV and rushing down, and the way that you come in this room, I kind of saw that, and then all of a sudden seeing these lights and cameras kind of thing. I couldn't
So
figure out.
they sort of buzzed right past
Right
you.
past you, because they were going down the hallway to where the rooms were and all
Right.
the other stuff and that too.
Right.
And then one of the officers stopped and yelled at us that those of us sitting there, that this is a raid, don't stay still, don't go anywhere, kind of thing. And then it dawned, I think, on me and the others there, why all of this traffic was going. Because once a couple of police officers started running in, it never ended. It was like boom.
Well,
boom.
it was like
Because there are
56 people.
I know.
That's a
I
lot.
know, with cameras and video and
Yeah.
like it was like, what is going on? I knew about the raids. I have to admit I was shocked, because I think most people, including myself, thought, oh, it never happened in Edmonton.
Right.
There's been no noise. Police haven't come around to the place. No one said anything.
Like, we're nobody. Who would bother with us?
Exactly. And I think that was the attitude at the time.
Yeah.
Kind of thing in that. And I think many of us thought that way. You be quiet, stay below the line kind of thing and that, and no one paying attention to it or care about it. And most people didn't know there were gays and lesbians in the city. They would say, oh, no, we don't have any people
Right.
here. As the next few minutes went on, and we were told not to go anywhere, and they were running all over the place and doing that, I also started to get concerned as to what this meant for us as individuals. And
in terms of like what were
going to happen to us,
how this was going to affect your future and stuff like
oh,
that.
the future, and even for that time, I'm going to take us and put us in jail. I mean, we didn't have any idea. Then we could hear the doors being kicked open and stuff. They told people that to get their clothes that didn't, and that so people like myself were just waiting around. And then they photographed each one of us holding a card in front of us with our name on. Somebody said they thought it was a number on. I do not remember that part, whether they did or not.
Right.
But they definitely photographed me with my name on.
Yeah.
As well as everyone else. Then in the alley, which was of course dark, except for all of a sudden there were two or three paddy wagons back here.
Yeah.
And that I don't have much experience before in paddy wagons.
Oh, really?
And I haven't since. I'm glad to say. But you know, we got herded in, got into paddy wagons. There were I think like 7, 8 of us. Initially pretty silent, and then a little bit more talking. But then there was concern that the officer in the front, and that they could hear everything we were saying, and,
right.
And people were mainly kind of saying, so what's really what is this going to mean? And they're taking us to the court and the police station. That I was like, I know we'd been arrested and whatever, and we got these things, and they took pictures.
Did you think you were going to prison right then?
I think there was concern that whether we were going to be put in a cell.
Right.
We didn't know. I was personally started to be very annoyed that I had not known better what this was all about, and hadn't paid more attention to the raids in Toronto and Montreal, which I read about.
Oh, interesting.
But it bothered me that I wasn't up on what this all meant and how it might develop, because in those two cities the founders were not kept in jail.
Right.
But I didn't know that.
For most of the men in Edmonton's Pisces spa that night, the first indication that something was wrong came when the sound system suddenly got jacked way up. Men with rooms towards the back of the single-story gay bath didn't realize for some minutes that the sound was covering the splintering of cubicle doors as 50 Edmonton police officers, 6 members of the RCMP, and 2 Crown attorneys fanned quickly through the building.
And so I'm 3 years on the job, fairly new minted constable, kind of feeling a little bit comfortable with the job at this point. But there's so much to learn as you go through your career. And then one night we get this request, and there's going to be a raid or an operation or whatever done downtown.
Suddenly there was a lot of noise and bright lights, he told me. All these uniformed police came running by, and suddenly there was this guy with a video camera with lights on it, and he panned it back and forth over us. One guy was still in the jacuzzi, and there was someone in the shower. Then one cop stopped and said, "Don't move. You're under arrest for being found-ins in a common body house. Anything you say can be used against you in court."
Reports vary as to how much damage was done. Some found-ins told me the police just kicked in the doors. Others said they kicked holes in walls as well. In every case, however, the probing lens and bright lights of the video cameras stabbed into every room, into the shower areas, into the 2 dark rooms. The police told everyone to stay as he was. Later, a police photographer came by.
Upon my initial entrance into the area, I noted that there was one person standing in the shower area having a shower. He began looking around to see what was taking place, but said nothing. I immediately approached him and informed him that he was under arrest for being found in a bawdy house. It should be noted that he was naked with the exception of a red in color elastic band with a key and a small copper disc with room number 124 stamped on it.
The details of the raid have always made my blood run cold, and trust me, that's not even scratching the surface of how many different accounts there are of what happened inside that night. Let's check in with our readers to find out how they felt about the material that they were reading.
That's freaky. You can hear the sound of those doors like breaking, or not the sound of them, like the just watching them break, but not being able to hear. Yeah, all at once. Okay.
When I think of like police records, like official records, I don't expect the language to be so like openly biased. You'd think that they would present the facts, maybe that the bias would be in there subtly, but this is so, even in official documentation, is so disdainful.
It's interesting that there was no one else except for the police officers. Like, they seem to be swarming everywhere. I can only imagine how terrifying that image is.
I didn't know the RCMP were involved in the raid. I thought it was city police. I don't know, that makes it a bit more insidious too, right? Because there's coordination on a different level.
God, so then it's like, yeah, it's like every person in there had like a person going after them. Oh my God. And this, I mean, 40 years ago, but like really that's not that long ago.
Like my generation is the first generation of queer people that is not hunted by the government, certainly in Canada. And I find that I really feel that. Like this fear, I can only imagine. It would be the worst thing possible. I don't know how queer gay men survived the 80s. With all of this and the AIDS crisis, it feels so overwhelming.
So the police stormed into the Pisces bathhouse at 1:30 in the morning. By the time that 60 men were processed, the paperwork was done, and they were all photographed, it was almost daylight. But the darkness of that evening's events wasn't over yet. Michael's going to tell us what happened next. The courtroom was all ready when you got there. There was already judges in place. There was court
No,
clerks.
the judges went there initially until
Okay.
everybody got there.
Okay.
And then I think a court official came and said, all right, the judge will come and tell you what's happening next. And then the judge came in and said, we're going to take you individually to a room and ask questions of you, and which you need to tell us what you answer the questions.
Right.
And so some of us, and I was one of them, said, "Wait a minute, I should be able to have a lawyer, and couldn't I make sure that happens?" And they repeated the same thing. They said exactly the same thing that I just said.
So they didn't answer your question.
No, they didn't. And somebody said, "Then I'm not going to." Whatever. And they said, "If you don't answer, if you refuse to answer, we'll put you in a cell." At which point I sweated like mad, because I couldn't decide in my mind whether I would actually say anything, because I knew immediately, they said it wouldn't be used against you.
Right.
That was part. But I also knew it could be used against everybody else.
That's exactly
Kind of thing,
the trick.
which is what they wanted.
Yeah.
Kind of thing in that too. And I was not sure what I would do. Actually confronted that room with the judge and a police officer telling me, say this. If you had to use the washroom or something like that, they would escort you.
Yeah.
I mean, otherwise, you couldn't leave the room except
Wow.
for that. But after about, I would say 12 or 15.
That many?
I think so.
Wow.
They came back in and said, all right, everyone, all of you can now go. And that kind of thing. You've got your stuff and you can leave. And so it was like, okay. I mean, obviously we were relieved that
So
we
now,
could go.
just to clarify, this started at 5 in the morning. The
It
raid
was
was
up-
at 1:30.
Yeah,
By the time
yeah.
you got to the courthouse, the hearing was at 5 in the morning.
Yeah, yeah.
So the sun's coming up now.
Oh yeah, yeah. Oh, it was sunny because people like many of us, of course, were parked over here.
Yeah.
And so I remember walking back here and it was sunny. And by the time I was here, it must have been, I think by the time I got back here, it was like 7 because
Wow.
they did these first people and went through, and then they said you could go. And by that time, I suspect it was 6:30 or after 6. I'm not
Right.
sure. And so I and others walked back here to get our vehicles where we were parked. And if there were a couple of people that did a little chatting, most walked pretty much in silence at that point.
Right.
Most people were tired and exhausted, and also very upset with what had happened,
Of
and
course.
that you had a summons to appear in court, and you had to appear. You could, kind of thing, and that, and no idea what could happen to you in court.
And you never were given a chance to call a lawyer.
No, not
Never?
at all. Never. No.
What about the morality chief that says that there was a phone ready available for anyone to?
Boy, I'm sure I would have remembered that.
There are conflicting reports of what happened in the Alberta provincial courtroom at 5 a.m. that Saturday morning. Everyone agrees there were 2 provincial court judges ready, plus court clerks and crown attorneys, and that the 60 prisoners were read Section 183 of the Criminal Code, and cautioned that they must answer all questions and answer them truthfully.
The defendants are adamant that several of them asked to speak to a lawyer and were refused, and others asked to make a phone call and were also refused. Chief of Morality told me that there was a phone set up and that anyone who had wished to speak to counsel could have done so. Oddly enough, it seems no one did.
Then they let everyone get their stuff and then started filling up paddy wagons and taking them to the old courthouse. The courthouse of the day, which is now gone, which is now where the concert hall is. The wind spear and the empty parking lot were all part of that complex at that time. And so by the time that was probably, at the courthouse, it was probably about 5 in the morning.
What each person said could not be used against him in any future trial. That's what the law says, and that's what the men were told. What they weren't told, however, and what the chief of morality admitted quite blithely to me, was that everything each person said could be used against anyone else on the premises, and what anyone else said could be used against you.
Then they had somebody else, a court official, who indicated that they were going to question everyone individually. And that's when a number of people started saying, wait a minute, what is this? Everyone individually, what is going on? We need to talk to a lawyer. They repeated the same thing again, almost word for word. We'll call your name. And at that point, there was quite a bit of tension and worry. And they did that, I would say, for 8 or 10 people, one at a time. I don't know if anyone knows exactly how many. And then the same guy came back and said, everyone can go. You got your tickets for your court date. But then it was about 6 in the morning.
After everything the found-ins had already been through and experienced during the raid, it must have been terrifying to realize that the entire weight of the judicial system was now being sort of stacked against them. Let's find out what our readers thought of this abusive process.
Yeah, I feel like I was really struck also by that they were anticipating a lot of violence, and there was very little resistance. Seems really sad that it's just sort of resignation, greeted with resignation as well. Yeah.
Yes, yeah, when you were initially describing the situation, like with all the clerks there and judges and everyone has this trap has been perfectly laid and obviously they had enough information to go in and take everyone there and, you know, catch them all in the act, like in a true entrapment. And then, you know, have your judge, jury, and executioner be waiting for you as you're being pulled out of the bathhouse. Like, it very much, very carefully crafted.
Yeah, that makes me feel awful. That makes me feel like this is such a miscarriage of I mean, the charges anyway are dubious at best, right? So how does it, you know, and then that this was carried out this way, that's some, you know, despicable, dubious sting. That's not a carriage of the law or anything. It's quite frightening too, right? That things would conspire against you like that and really dehumanize you over a period of hours in the middle of the night.
One of the things that keeps sitting with me is the term "found in," because it feels like such a dehumanizing term, and also kind of removes any idea of sexuality in it. Like it doesn't feel like a sexual term, or like, you know, like, I'm surprised that they're not using the word deviant more often.
Evidently, this was an operation that they used a lot of resources, went out of their way to deploy those resources in such an organized fashion. One could only wish that the police and organizations like the RCMP and whatnot could do the same thing for missing and murdered Indigenous women, but of course that's colonialism.
In addition to the reactions of our readers, there's actually some really interesting reactions going on in the chat right now. And some people that I know that are in the chat, I just want to say hi to all of you. Thanks so much for joining us today. Yes, Vegas Broad was wondering if a conservative government was in power. And to that, I have to say it was Alberta. So you know that was. So it's very interesting to sort of gauge the reactions that are happening. And the next thing we're going to chat about, through the lens of today, it's hard to imagine how this story would have been reacted to. So, and what the response would have been from Edmontonians. Michael's going to tell us a little bit about that.
Right. By the time they got to my trial and the rest of that, one of the later ones on that kind of thing, generally they weren't. I mean,
right.
By then it was a foregone conclusion and there wasn't much to see. You could hear the same thing, see the same view again. I could see the lockers being opened, you know, and closed. It was really exciting.
Did you see the footage while you were in court?
Oh yeah, yeah. They showed some of the footage.
So what was that like to watch the footage?
Most of it was bizarre and ridiculous. They showed a couple of actually the TV room tables with different magazines and newspapers on, all which you can get at the drugstore, making a big deal about them, you know, kind of thing. I was like, oh my God, this is ridiculous. And then they did show a couple photos of empty rooms, you know, kind of thing, and they may have shown the outside. I don't remember that part, kind of thing, in that as well. But there was nothing in those photos that would be significant. They did show a photo of where you sign in, as well, and that too. I do remember that as well. They had a photo of the TV, the room they were sitting watching TV. My opinion was that the photo image stuff that they had was absolutely useless.
What do you think the city was thinking when this was going on? What was the reaction that you were getting or that you were reading in the paper?
It was quite fascinating. In general, the comments and the letters to the editor and other stuff that was in, and even in the opinion piece, was, is this what police are doing? This is their work, and it's so important that you have 50 police going after these folks, kind of thing. Then,
so even Joe Average seemed like it was overkill.
It was, yeah, and the police commission brought it up at the commission with the police chief, who was trying to say that, oh yeah, you know, it was important. This is the kind of thing we do with body houses. It was like, I mean, it was clearly something that he didn't want to answer too much because it was so blown out. And by the time the police commission was even asking, I think the public opinion, a lot of public opinion was like, you know, this seems a little much. No one was accused of having hard drugs. No one was accused of being drunk. No one had guns, and that there was one knife in a bag that somebody brought.
I read about that. It was for cleaning his nails, he said.
Exactly, exactly. I never heard of anyone there prostituted. I can't say it never happened, but no one ever So there was nothing to go on except that we were found there, and under the criminal code, you just have to physically be there. And at that first meeting, there was a lawyer or two that were there who were able to indicate that it's most unlikely that anybody will go to jail. That would be, you'd have to lie in court, or
Right.
something like that. That it basically be a fine. But you were charged. You're going to have to go and you can say plead not guilty.
Yeah.
And by and large, most people, a very large number, did plead not guilty until the owners pleaded guilty, and then it meant that it was accepted, that the building was accepted as a body house, and so all that had to be proven is you were there.
And that was already proven.
Yes,
Right.
And so that led off every trial.
And how long did it take for your appeal to wind its way through the courts?
Yeah, it was probably about 16 to 18 months. The court, the appeal court, had issued an unconditional discharge, meaning that it was taken off of the record. It says if it didn't exist. I can't remember who said, the media wants to interview somebody that was there, and would you? And at the time, I was working for the provincial government as well, and I was like, and I was. A lot of people knew I was gay, but I wasn't public. So I hemmed and hawed, and whichever TV, it might have been more than one, said, well, we could do it so that your face isn't there and it's just your voice.
Right.
And I said, okay, I'll do that. So they interviewed me, and I said whatever I said. And on Monday, when I went to work, I had a call from somebody I worked with, and they said, oh, and I saw you on TV last night. I was like, what? How could that be?
You hadn't seen it?
No. Well, I had seen it, but how did she know it was me?
Oh.
Kind of, and she had said, oh, your voice is recognizable. Of course I knew it was you. And so that's what I had a little talk to myself, with myself kind of thing, and said, if I'm going to talk about it, I need to talk about it as Michael Phair. I decided I'm going to do it, and it'll be me, and that's it.
Gay spa charges now total 62. 2 more men, including a city neurologist, have been charged after further investigation of the Pisces Health Spa. They were charged by the city police today with keeping a common body house, a charge previously laid against 4 other persons following the raid. Charges were also laid against the registered company, Pisces Health Spa Limited, and there could be more charges yet, said a police spokesperson.
Dear Sir, it has been brought to my attention that you were of great assistance to this department between January 1981 and May 1981. I understand that members of Morality Control Unit asked for your assistance in letting this department use your business premises as an observation post during an extended investigation.
For policemen such as these to associate with members of the gay community on equal basis is worthy of note. However, they were also subjected to sexual advances, as well as observing personally revolting acts such as fellatio and anal intercourse between males. Lastly, being recognized and treated as a gay person by members of the spa.
They had a list of all the people charged and they put them on TV. And I sort of saw all these names and I thought, what is going on here? And a couple of my clients were so devastated by the fact that this was public. One of them had indicated to me, he said, I'm suicidal, I'm gonna do it.
I am writing concerning the article which appeared in the Journal on Monday, June 1st, 1981, regarding the Gay Alliance, wrongfully named as they are far from being gay, and in fact are far from being happy in any way. I would personally like to thank you for shutting down homosexual or heterosexual boarding houses as the law allows. I don't believe that 3% of the population, if the number is that high, have the right to change the law.
Thank you for your letter of support in regards to police action taken against a local health spa which was being operated as a common body house. The enforcement of laws intended to control vice and immorality is often distasteful and subject to much criticism of special interest groups.
Spa group, sex seen by police. 8 or more men engaged in sex together in a darkened pillow room at the Pisces Health Spa, an undercover police officer told provincial court. The constable said he and another officer watched large numbers of men participating in group sex acts on numerous occasions during his 8 visits to the spa.
Crown Counsel Michael Phair waxed eloquent in summation. Pisces was a place for quote-unquote pathetic individuals to cruise and pay for sexual liaisons and to quote-unquote rot like animals in a place expressively defined for quote-unquote gratification of lust, secrets, and anonymously, quote-unquote, because it is depraved.
Health spa became club for deviants, says judge. Put to the test, the Pisces Health Spa would have been shunned by the general public and most homosexuals, the judge said Tuesday. In convicting an Athabasca man of being a found-in at the spa May 30, the judge described the homosexual meeting place as a club for the deviants among homosexuals.
Spa let men rut like animals. The Pisces Health Spa offered a sexual smorgasbord for homosexuals who could go from one lustful relationship to another, Crown Prosecutor Michael Phair said yesterday. Homosexuality is not an offense, he told the provincial court judge. What is an offense is for groups of people to rut like animals in a place designed for that purpose. It insults the intelligence of any thinking person that the bunkhouse room was used for any purpose other than perversion.
I came across one fair policeman. I came across one fair prosecutor. I think there was one fair judge, not any of the cases that were assigned to me. They were all of a piece, all the same age, they were all the same type.
Some of this information you're hearing for maybe the first time, I've actually been reading over and over again for years, and I have to say it never stops shocking and disturbing me. I still have a really visceral reaction to some of it. Let's find out what our readers thought of the stuff that they were asked to read for us.
I don't know. I'm always sort of baffled by the way the media reports these things, because sometimes it seems like they are somehow unaware of the power they have, the influence they have. Sometimes it seems like they're aware and they don't really care. Sometimes it seems like they're aware and they're exercising that power maliciously. But the simple act of putting these folks who've been arrested on TV, I don't know, that might have been the single most damaging thing in this whole case, was the public nature of it.
I just want to give the biggest eye roll. What a load of bullshit. Thank you for helping. Okay, whatever. Yeah, like what? I didn't know. UPS even sent out thank you letters to witnesses or anyone that, to the public, for helping with the investigation. I think this is wild.
Well, that part really gets me. The what is it? Dedication, tenacity, and professionalism. Like, fuck you.
Yeah, I feel weird about how I responded to it more with humor than kind of like disgust of the situation. But I think it's just, it feels so like written in such like a farcical way.
I always find it ironic too. It's like Abundant Life Faith Ministries, and I'm like, are you for life though? Like, Are you using the word? Do you think you know, like, do you know what this word means? Oh, faith groups. Oh, dear. And people wonder why, like, why, like, a lot of queers are, like, uncomfortable around religion. And I'm like, wow, like, here's this.
This is the law of the land. This is the law of the land. We got to uphold this. And there's no moral, I don't know what to say. Like, there's no moral negotiation anymore when something is enshrined in law as it was then. And so on that, I mean, I feel like now we have some rights enshrined in law, in the Alberta Human Rights Code and the Charter of Rights and Freedoms. The police don't have this leverage whatsoever.
There's some really smart, interesting questions being put forward in the chat room. And if I was at home and surrounded by my piles of archives around my desk, which is just a mess, you have to see it sometime, I would totally look up those answers for you. Feel free to contact me later and we'll find out some of the information that people are asking about. But I'm hesitant to just kind of pull stuff out of my memory right now. I don't want to say the wrong thing. So one of my goals in researching this dark chapter of Edmonton's history was to put a human face on the events of May 30th, 1981, and to offer those people the dignity that was withheld from them at the time. Even 4 decades after the raid, the surviving found-ins that could be located didn't want to speak about their experience. But if you are interested in learning more about a few of the main characters in the raid, I encourage you to check out the series of 5 articles that I've written for the Edmonton City as Museum Project and read about some pillars of the queer community, men who had enormous impact on my life as a queer man and as an Edmontonian, that were trapped in this nightmare and how they coped with being caught in the machinery of the judicial system. Let's take a moment now to hear some final thoughts from our readers about their experience with this material. For me, these readings represent a moving and dramatic collision of past, present, and future as today's queer nation faces the legacies of the generations that came before.
It really feels like and I'm sure that was the intention, just that they rushed them all to the courthouse immediately, like, to prosecute them. It really feels like they didn't want people to know that they were doing it. Like, they just wanted to get it done and not have people know, which is, upsetting to think things work that way, or did work that way. Although I'm sure in some cases they still do work that way.
Yeah, invasion. That was the word I was trying to think of earlier. Invading your space. Like, where else are you going to go? You can't sink inside yourself deeper, you know? So, or I guess you could, but, like, again, what is that?
And now we don't even have to think about that. And yeah, it's, and that's what I mean when it's so hard to place myself in their shoes, because that's a totally different experience from what we're able to do now.
There's a lot of talk right now about conspiracies, and this was an obvious conspiracy. It was, planned between different levels and actors in government. This is oppression. This is the police and the courts working together to pin a crime on people that they've set up, essentially. People that they've, not given fair due process.
Yikes, this doesn't surprise me, but it's still hard to read. And just the interesting juxtaposition of, like, answering all questions and answering them truthfully after having just done their undercover sting.
I've just been thinking a lot about it, like, when, Darrin, you reached out to me to be a part of this, is that we have this very serious criminal investigation that happens in the 80s that the cops take on, and, like, this really still parallels for me, like, the situations that queer BIPOC folks experience today. And it's not, or at least I don't know what happens in police stations, or what files that you're clearly only finding now, but it makes me feel even more concerned for racialized folks now, in terms of the efforts that police go to, harass them on the street, It's just something that police continue to do and feel like they're on the right side of history. And I feel like this is just more evidence against like why a lot of the work that police do is useless and causes a lot more harm and damage than they could possibly realize.
Gross, yeah. So it's like already decided then, right? Yeah. All the other judges. One fair policeman, one fair prosecutor, one fair judge. Blah. Let's just burn it. Let's just burn everything.
Yikes. I feel like that, just reading it makes my heart like start going. So that fear is fucked up, and it adds so much to the shame that we feel. Like already we were going in these like quite literally dark, shady places to have sex and to express our sexuality and to enjoy our sexuality in a world that completely restricts it. And yet this deep-seated fear, the secrecy becomes shame. And here it's like confronted head on. That's a real like, maybe for me, that's a real fear of angry straight men acting out on their homophobia.
So in this case, the only thing I would say is they were able to use this extent to state power, and comfortably so, because they were still, it was a way for them to still maintain the comfort that they were living in a straight city. There was no stain in their narrative, in the things that made meaning to their everyday experience. Alberta is a good conservative province type thing. Just the extent of things that went into this, like they must have felt really threatened or exaggerated the sense of threat. And that the only way in which they could exaggerate that sense of threat is through some ideological, pathological relationship to it. Something in that made them feel threatened of their own enjoyment and whatnot. That's how a lot of ideology works.
Like that's got to be so alienating and isolating and terrifying. And yeah, how could you like be in this moment in your life, and like how hard would it be to imagine, you know, a time, a few months, a few years later when everything's fine? Especially when we know the other side of the story, the voices of these queer people, or the queer community in general, were largely not brought to the public attention. You know, like the average person in Edmonton wouldn't be hearing voices saying, hey, this raid was actually really unethical and unnecessary and brutal and horrible. They wouldn't hear that. So they'd only get this one source and be sort of pigeonholed into thinking about these people in a really dehumanized way.
I want to take a moment to thank the dozens of people who shared their memories of this difficult time. And I want to take this opportunity to reach out virtually to those who might be watching today who may have more memories to contribute. History is a moving target, and the story is never finished being written. It's never too late to share. Thanks also to the Edmonton Arts Council for making this commemoration possible, and the talented team at Theatre Network for treating these stories with the respect that they deserve. I look forward to the day when these stories can be premiered on the brand new Theatre Network stage, live at the Roxy on 124th Street. I want to thank you for watching. You'll notice I'm not my usual effervescent self that you might be used to. I'm not going to lie. This has been a difficult story to research because in many cases, the Pisces raid altered lives forever. The true cost of the damage to reputations, careers, families, even lives has never been fully assessed. However, I do want to close this commemoration by leaving you with a more uplifting and hopeful image, one that speaks to the tenacity and endurance of the queer nation and of our concept of pride and protest, an image that emerged in the July heat of 1981 during that most Edmontonian of summer festivals, Klondike Days. And it should come as no surprise that at the center of that hopeful image is our good friend, Michael Phair. Thanks so much for watching. So I'm going to tell
Yeah,
another
yeah.
story here that I've heard about. I wish I had been there in the moment.
Yeah.
But as the trials were going on that summer, there
Yeah.
was Klondike Days happened,
Oh,
and there was
yes.
something called the Sourdough Raft Race,
Absolutely.
which people from Edmonton will probably remember.
Yeah.
And there was a
We went-
float that was a bit of a protest
It
to what
was.
had happened,
It
and it was
was.
called the SS Pisces.
Pisces 2. SS
Pisces 2. Okay, good. Now I have to go back and correct that article that I just submitted. Thanks for that. but you were on that float.
Yes, I was.
You were floating down the North Saskatchewan, and tell us what
Absolutely.
you were wearing. You were dressed as a rubber ducky.
I was because we used the theme Little Rubber Ducky. Remember the song
Yeah, I
Rubber
do.
Ducky? And I was the ducky, and I had an outfit that was made. I was part of the group that did this work. We made the draft. We made the sail, which was a pink triangle, and we called
Hilarious.
it the Gay 90s on the sail.
The gay 90s.
Yeah.
Amazing.
Kinda
All right.
made that.
I
And it
think
was
we-
a big pink.
I love that you used a pink
like-
triangle for the sail.
Oh yeah,
that's
it was big,
fantastic.
and I think it was just a great big sheet.
Yeah, what happened to the SS Pisces? Did it win the race? Did it float? Did it sink? What
No,
happened?
no. It floated.
Yeah, it did float.
It went down the river the whole way because it was an annual event. Did we know that? No. There were any number of rafts that were significantly built, big motors. I had also had hoses so they could spray everyone. We didn't realize that was part of it. Did we have any of that? But before we got in the water, we were soaked. We were soaked. We had rented a small motor. It never worked the whole time. It was a
So
waste
you were
of
like
money.
floating like free.
So we had some poles so that we could push ourselves a bit in that too. There were probably 10, 12 of us that actually worked on building the float and the
Right.
costumes, and then I think there were 5 of us on there were 4 or 5 of us on it. The tape would play "You're a Rubber Ducky." We would kind of sing that and turn around, which was useless because it wasn't ever loud. I mean, this was a long time ago. It wasn't loud enough for
Of
anybody
course
to hear
not.
it. Yeah.
You probably risked electrocution. because
You're
of
probably
that.
right. Yeah.
Oh my God.
But we made it to the end in a yellow ducky outfit with a tea cozy that was yellow fluffy on my head.
Michael, thank you so much
Yes.
for joining us in this
Of course.
place of
Yeah.
repute of some sort.
Yeah.
40 years after the fact. And thanks for sharing your story so honestly. You're still one of the only people to go on the record and tell us what it was like to actually be inside that night. So we really appreciate your. I know you don't like the word courage and bravery, but you know, there's a reason that you're an icon in this town.
Yeah.
Thank you so much.
I'm delighted.
All right.
Yeah.